Magic is one of the most widely used tropes of the fantasy genre, and it's not that difficult to understand why, as pop culture often represents magic and magical worlds as better and more exciting than normal life. After all, what would you rather do? Attend public school or learn how to cast spells and ride a broomstick at Hogwarts? The term magical has even become a byword for things that are too beautiful and awe-inspiring to exist in the real world. However, while magic today is seen as something separate from real life, we often forget that it wasn't always this way, as most modern magic and fantasy stories take influence from real-world traditions and folklore. So, for this video, I thought it'd be fun to go over the history of some of the more well-known forms of fortune-telling, to see where they came from and how they've changed over the centuries. While tea leaf reading has gained considerable recognition thanks to books like Harry Potter and Coraline, this form of divination has been around for a long time. The discovery of tea can be traced to China during the 3rd millennium BC, where, according to legend, the drink was discovered by accident after some leaves fell into a pot of boiling water belonging to the emperor. Emperor Shennong then decided to drink the strange new concoction, and one of the world's most popular drinks was born, supposedly. While it's believed that the art of tea leaf reading, or tasseomancy, also originated in China, it's uncertain exactly when the tradition first began. The modern practice of tea leaf reading originated in Britain sometime in the late 17th or early 18th century. While drinking tea was initially a luxury only afforded to the very wealthy, extensive trade and competition eventually led to more affordable pricing, and the drink soon became popular among the lower class. This eventually led to tea leaves and tea leaf reading becoming a substitute for other forms of divination, such as stereoscopy, which divined the future using hot wax. It's not hard to see why tea leaves were the more preferred option, as this method came with a hot beverage and was less likely to set the kitchen table on fire. The practice of tossing the cups, as it was known in the 18th century, became incredibly popular during the Victorian era, leading to the creation of tea reading products and paraphernalia, including fortune-telling cups, which were often decorated with common tea leaf symbols and images from the zodiac. This didn't last long, however, as after the invention of tea bags in 1908, the popularity of tea reading went on the decline. Apparently the leaves from tea bags are too mushy for tea leaf reading. Despite this, tea leaf reading is still practiced in many countries across the world. And there are even cafes and tea houses that specifically cater to clients that want to have their fortune told. For those of you who want to try reading tea leaves for yourself, a reading generally goes something like this. After the tea is consumed, the cup is then passed to the reader, who will then spin the cup counterclockwise in their hand 3 times, before emptying out any remaining liquid into a saucer. Any leaves that remain will then be interpreted by the reader based on their shape and placement within the cup. Shapes found near the rim of the cup are believed to foretell events in the near future, while those on the bottom predict far-off events. On the other hand, shapes found near the handle of the cup are thought to predict events relating to the person's immediate surroundings, while those directly across from the handle represent outside influences. Some of the most common symbols that crop up during a reading are an acorn symbolizing continued or improved health, an anchor symbolizing good luck in business or love, though the reverse can be expected if the image is blurry or indistinct. A heart represents a lover or marriage if it appears close to a ring. An owl represents sickness or poverty and is often a warning against starting a new venture. Palm trees are a good omen and represent success in any undertaking. And finally, triangles represent unexpected good fortune. Unfortunately, I couldn't find anything about a black dog or a grim symbolizing bad luck, so I think we can all just assume that Professor Trelawney was full of BS. Crystal balls are synonymous with fortune-telling and the occult, to the point that whenever they appear in books or on TV, we know that the owner is probably a witch, wizard, mystic, etc. But where did this tradition come from? Well, crystal balls are used in a type of divination called scrying, a word which derives from the term to scry, which means to discover or catch sight of something. While crystal balls are the most common and frequently used tools for scrying, the ritual can be performed using any reflective surface. So, whenever you see a character in a book or a movie searching for answers in a magic mirror, that's technically scrying. It's long been believed that one of the first people to employ crystal balls for the purpose of scrying were the Celtic Druids. Druids were religious practitioners who were believed to have lived during the Iron Age throughout Britain, Ireland, and Gaul. Because so little is known about the Druids, as they rarely wrote anything down, most of the knowledge we have about them comes from outside sources. One such source is natural history, the world's first encyclopedia written by Pliny the Elder and completed in 77 CE. An entire chapter of natural history is dedicated to recording the lives of the ancient Druids, while the following chapter denounces the use of several magical rituals, including those that employ water and spheres for the purpose of divination. As Othony stated, there are many kinds of magic. For divination, he uses water, spheres, air, stars, lamps, basins, axes, and many other means. Moreover, he communicates with ghosts and those of the lower world. While this quote does suggest that ancient cultures used a form of scrying that employed spheres, not unlike modern crystal balls, there's no evidence that Druids invented this practice, as the quote bears no mention of them. The idea that Druids used crystal balls is also not supported by archaeological findings, as there has never been a definitive discovery of Druid remains. And those sites that may share some connection to the ancient sorcerers, such as the tomb discovered near Stanway, England, do not possess anything akin to a crystal ball. While the origin of crystal balls is shrouded in mystery, their enduring popularity is due largely to their use as instruments of divination within occult circles. In addition to advancements in art and science, the Renaissance brought with it an increased appreciation for scrying and other occult practices. Inspired by the Picatrix, a book of magic and astrology believed to have been written sometime during the 11th century, members of the educated elite in Europe began to practice scrying and even tried to establish it as a quasi-scientific practice. Arguably the most famous Renaissance magician was John Dee, who worked as an advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. Using his clove glass, a small black mirror traditionally used by artists, and possibly also a crystal ball, Dee was said to divine the future and communicate with angels. The popularity of scrying did not disappear after the Renaissance ended, however, as the devastation of World War I left many people with a desire to communicate with the departed. This spiritualist revival resulted in a renewed interest in scrying and other occult practices, a trend that many people sought to capitalize on. One such person was Claude Alexander Conlin, aka Alexander the Man Who Knows, a stage mentalist who performed predictions with the help of his trusty crystal ball. Conlin's supposed psychic abilities brought him tremendous acclaim and opened up various merchandising opportunities, including the creation and sale of his own brand of crystal balls. So why are crystal balls such an enduring symbol of magic and the occult? Merchandising! Though I'm sure the other stuff I mentioned also played a part. Palm reading, also known as chiromancy, is believed to have originated in ancient India, though its exact origins are unclear, something which seems to be a bit of a trend in this video. While palm reading was used in one form or another in ancient China, Tibet, Persia, Mesopotamia, and Egypt, One of the oldest references we have to palm reading was written by Aristotle, who, in his Historia Animalium, a 5-volume text about animal zoology, states his belief that people with long palm lines tend to live longer. The practice of palm reading continued into the Middle Ages, where it was systematized for the first time by a German physician named John Rothman, who tried to get the practice integrated into the German medical curriculum. Okay, from this point onward, palm reading started to be viewed through a scientific lens, as people tried to understand the palm's significance in relation to personality and the human mind. Two men who contributed greatly to the advancement and continued popularity of palmistry were Casimir, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name, and Adrian Adolphe Desperolis. Both men wrote monumental works dealing with the scientific basis of palmistry, which helped to make the craft more accepted within the scientific community. Casimir in particular spent years studying palm lines and charting their corresponding characteristics, in an attempt to understand their possible connection to human nature. If this sounds a bit unbelievable, for context, try to keep in mind that phrenology, the science of determining a person's personality and skill set using the bumps on their head, was also widely practiced at this time. However, Casimir and Adrian weren't alone in their assertions, as some physicians at this time hypothesized that there could be a connection between palm lines and the human mind. One of the first doctors to attempt to analyze the possible psychological implications of palm reading was Dr. Carl Gustav Caras, personal physician to the King of Saxony, who wrote a book explaining his hypothesis that the fingers of the human hand were reflective of the conscious mind, while the palm represented the unconscious mind. Okay, sure. Caras' theories about the psychological implications of palm reading were carried into the 20th century by psychologists such as Carl Jung and Dr. Charlotte Wolff. Dr. Wolff in particular devoted years to the study of hands and classified over 90,000 variations according to human character types, psychological profiles, and physical and mental abnormalities. Though science and palm reading may sound like contradictory terms, hands and palm lines are still subjects of scientific study today, while palm lines, also known as palm reflection creases, exist to aid in the movement and folding of palm skin. Palm lines still differ from person to person, a quality that remains a subject of scientific investigation. Dermatoglyphics is a branch of science that analyzes rich patterns of the fingers, palms, soles, and toes to gather data used in anthropological, criminal, and medical research, including the study of chromosome abnormalities such as Down syndrome. An example of this is the study of simian creases. While most people have two distinct lines at the top of their palm, referred to as the proximal transverse crease and distal transverse crease, a small percentage of the population have just one crease line, referred to as a single transverse palmar crease, or simian crease. While simian creases appear in only a small percentage of the population, doctors have noted that they occur more frequently in patients with certain medical conditions, such as Down syndrome, fetal alcohol syndrome, and Aschenbach syndrome. While the correlation between simian creases and conditions like Down syndrome could be a coincidence, research into this phenomenon is still ongoing, as the underlying cause of simian creases is unknown. A careful study of a person's hands can also be used to help diagnose certain medical conditions. For instance, narrow transverse lines under the fingernails, aka Merck's lines, indicate that the person in question is suffering from a lack of albumin, a protein responsible for a number of bodily functions. Patients with Merck's lines are often found to be suffering from liver disease, though they've also been observed in chemotherapy patients, as well as those suffering from kidney disease and malnutrition. So, if your local palm reader correctly diagnoses you as albumin deficient, they're either a genuine psychic or spend a lot of time on WebMD. And this concludes part 2 of my Weird History series. This script was honestly a lot longer than I intended, but I started researching and ended up falling down a rabbit hole of information that brought me to some strange places. I honestly never thought I'd talk about Druid tombs and the history of tea in the same video, but here we are. As always, I must remind you to please remember to support your local library, and I'll see you next time.